Child sexual exploitation is where a child is groomed and coerced for the purposes of sex.
It is an issue here. I think it's really important that people open their minds to the fact that it can happen in any community.
It's not just illegal, it's morally abhorrent. It outrages me as a father. It outrages me as a man, and it certainly outrages me as a police and crime commissioner.
People don't realise actually it's happening in everyday life. It's happening, down their street, and they really need to raise the awareness and be aware of the signs to look out for.
I'm Jane, and this is my story. I know this sounds a bit boring, but I suppose I was what you might call normal.
Child sexual exploitation can and does affect both girls and boys. And certainly, there's no stereotypical type of child it affects either. It could be a child from a very dysfunctional home, but equally it could be a child from a very loving home.
I was okay at school, hung out with my mates and spent a lot of time at home arguing with my brother.
You can't look at a young person and know that they're a victim of sexual exploitation. There's no kind of typical young person who asks support. The young people we work with come from a range of backgrounds, cultures, various ages, across the whole of Hull and East Riding.
I'd never had what you called a boyfriend, but some of my mates did, and it was all they went on about. I remember thinking that when I got a boyfriend, I wasn't going to be like that. Then I met Sam. I'd been hanging out with my mates and I was on my way home when he pulled up in his car.
Because it can happen where a young person initially becomes friends with another young person, and that seems perfectly okay.
I'd seen him around before. He knew a mate's boyfriend, and I remember thinking he was really well fit.
95% of the perpetrators who had abused children were actually known to those children. They were acquaintances, friends and family. And so we have to tell the children that, because otherwise we're quite literally aiding and abetting the perpetrators who are preying on our children.
I couldn't believe it when he spoke to me. He asked me if I wanted a lift anywhere. I told him I was going home, and he said it'd be a lot more fun if I was going for a ride with him. But I told him that my mum would be waiting for me. I couldn't believe I said that. I felt so stupid. But he said it was cool and that he'd see me around.
If you listen to victims, what they will tell you is this can often be a long, drawn-out process where somebody gets into their confidence. They feel that these people are very, very interested in them, really care about them, know everything about them, give them presents, treat them as though they're special, make them feel good. And it can take a long, long time before then suddenly what they are required to do to maintain that feeling of friendship and somebody making them feel good, suddenly is things that they don't really want to do.
I saw Sam a week later when I was on my way home from school. He asked me how my mum was. I was pretty sure he was teasing me, but it was really funny and I didn't mind. He told me that he'd be getting a new car soon and I really should go for a ride with him. He said that he'd seen me on Instagram because we both knew some of the same people. He said I looked hot with my hair down and that I'm prettier than my mates.
It's very evident that young people are out there putting information on about where they're hanging out at the weekends, where they are in the evening, that they're feeling particularly lost or alone or sad if they've split up with their boyfriend and girlfriend, and people are out there to get hold of this information and to use and abuse it in that way.
And it's really important for us to get that message across. This can happen online. That process of being befriended, somebody giving you lots of attention, offering you gifts, offering you compliments, really developing a very strong attachment can happen online just as easily as it can happen, on the street or at a shopping centre.
Do you really want to send a picture? Not really. And what we kind of say to young people is, don't put anything on the internet that you wouldn't show your gran.
Later that night we started following each other on Instagram and I added him on Facebook. We were chatting online until 2 o'clock about stuff. He was really interested in me and what I thought. A boy had never really spoken to me like this before, and he said that he thought I was right about a lot of things like mates, school, mum, what a pain little brothers were, and some stuff I'd never really thought about before. He said I seemed really grown up. He asked me to send him a photograph of me in bed, and I did. He He sent me a picture back. He had his shirt off and said I should do the same. I said no at first, but he kept asking. I sent him some. You couldn't really see anything, but my mum would have killed me if she found out.
Young people and children are natives now to the internet, and it's fantastic, and it's an online digital world and we love it, and it's around embracing it. But for us, it's around kind of saying to them young people, are things being safe? Do you know what's going on there?
It may be that within the peer groups they're sending photographs to themselves of one another, which is obviously the inappropriate photographs. And some of these young people who are actually victims of sexual exploitation online don't necessarily know they are victims until again, they're spoken to in school or they see things on the television.
There isn't a typical young person, and therefore there isn't a typical type of behaviour. But what I would say, like with any change in circumstances, that if there are particular changes in mood, or a young person goes from being very outgoing, very happy, to being quite reserved, then potentially there is an issue, an underlying issue. It may not be CSE, but it's certainly worth exploring.
I started seeing Sam more and more. He'd pick me up from the park and I could tell that some of my mates were well jealous. We'd go for rides in his new car. He started buying me things, like new clothes and jewellery. He said I was his princess. Mum kept being nosy. Just because her love life was non-existent didn't mean she could pry into mine. I was careful about what I said I was doing, where I'd been, and made sure she wouldn't find the pictures or messages I was sending to Sam. She'd have gone mental if she'd seen them.
It is a really difficult time, and young people are dealing with so many more complex issues than perhaps we dealt with when we were that age. Body image is a real problem. Peer pressure is a massive problem. That opportunity that is out there for exploring things like potentially alcohol, drugs, sexual activity.
Teenagers do experiment in a wide range of different things. Where the crossover comes for us is looking at the wider picture in terms of the coercion, the young person's vulnerabilities, and a whole range of different things for a young person, what's going on if they've been taken away from their friendship groups or families, if they feel they have to do something, and if they have the inability to say no.
For some young people that we're working with, they may be absent from school and they may be going missing from home. They may be having a number of presents or unexplained gifts in their possession, what parents or carers are not aware where they've come from.
And in terms of a change in social patterns of behaviour as well, if they're a young person who for a long time has been sat in their bedroom on computer games and all of a sudden they start going out to parties and that kind of thing, then again that would indicate to me that there has been a change. And what that change is, it might just be that they've gone from being 14 to being 15. And that again is perfectly normal, which I think is why it's difficult to spot, because young people do experience those changes as they grow up, and sometimes it's completely normal, perfectly natural. Other times it's to do with something else which is more sinister.
Everybody has a role to play in this, because everybody is in relationships. They know people, whether they're a parent or whether they're a teacher or whether they're a carer. Anybody can spot differences in somebody's behaviour, or suddenly there's somebody new on the scene and this is creating a whole load of behaviour that's unusual, or somebody's behaving in a way that people are not happy about. And that's the kind of information they need to either challenge but also flag up.
Sam said he'd got me a new phone so that he could get hold of me whenever he wanted, and that we should have something just between us. He told me to dress up nice as we'd be going to a party. The parties Sam took me to weren't like the ones I'd been to before. It felt really grown up. I'd had beer before, but everyone kept sharing it out, and Sam was giving me vodka. There were people taking drugs too, but Sam said that I was his princess and they shouldn't be offering me stuff like that. He was like my protector, and for the first time ever, I was completely in love. I didn't see much of my old mates anymore. Sam's mates were really nice to me and fun. It was like a different world to being nagged by mum and teachers all the time.
It's where them parties and the young people are drinking alcohol, and lots of alcohol, and maybe experimenting in drugs, and then a young person is obviously then with boyfriend and or girlfriend and given free drugs and alcohol, and then asked to pay that back.
I was at one of the parties and I'd been having a good time, but Sam seemed worried. At first he wouldn't tell me what the matter was, but later he told me that he was in trouble as he owed some money to some guys, and they were getting rough about it. I said I'd give him the money if I could, but that I only had a little bit saved up. He told me that if I really wanted to help, there was a way. I'm not sure I really understood because he had so much vodka, but I said I'd do anything to help. Of course I would.
You wouldn't necessarily think it's okay for me, as a, say, for example, a 13-year-old girl to talk to a man in his 30s. When you've been introduced through a couple of people you've become friendly with, you probably think it's okay.
He said that if I went with the men he owed the money to, they wouldn't be after him anymore. Sam took me to them and said that he'd wait outside to take me home afterwards. On the drive home we hardly said anything. He dropped me near to my house and told me I was his princess. I told him I loved him. They really hurt me. I still couldn't quite believe what had happened.
That's what we call it's a gang type issue where you get passed up a chain, but the important thing for people to remember is it can start with somebody who's your age, who maybe goes to your school or hangs about where you hang about, and then they can introduce you to other people and keep moving up the chain. So it's not somebody approaches you on the street who's what we would have classed in the past as a dirty old man. It's actually a more sophisticated process.
Sam took me to more parties, but they weren't like the ones before. The men seemed a bit older. There were hardly any other girls there, and I didn't drink for fun anymore. Sam told me that he was in more trouble with money than we realised, and that some men had threatened to hurt him unless I'd help pay them back. It was happening all the time. Sometimes I was driven to places I'd never even been to before. Different places, different blokes. They all looked at me like I was nothing. I was drinking more and more, and Sam even gave me drugs. He was different now. He said he loved me, but he kept taking me to these places.
I think it starts off being something which is quite a friendly, approachable, little presents, gifts, but it then leads on to something which is very sinister and almost traps young people into a pattern of behaviour which they can't see a way out of.
If someone's asking them to do something what they feel uncomfortable with, then they've got every right to say no, whether they're being bribed with presents, or tickets for certain things, on new mobile phones, cigarettes or drugs, then that's when we start to cross over to the exploitation side.
One night, a man really hurt me because he said I'd embarrassed him in front of his friends. Sam seemed to find it funny. The next morning I texted him to say I couldn't come out anymore. I told him this wasn't making me happy. I said I'd had to miss school and lie to my mum about how I'd been hurt. He sent me back one of the photos I'd sent him from my bedroom. He said that if my mum really wanted to know what was going on, he should send her this and share it with everyone else too. I tried to ignore his messages, but they were just getting worse. He told me he'd been to my brother's rugby training and wondered how well he'd play with broken kneecaps. I went to meet him. He told me he loved me and that this was the way things were going to be for a while, but that they'd get better one day. I felt trapped. I wanted to go to the police, but Sam told me that I was a druggie now, and no one would believe anything I said. He said I might even get sent down, and that no one would want anything to do with me after that.
One of the things that we ask young people is, what happens if you said no?
Well, I think if any young person says no, or any person, no matter what age they are, any form of that is exploitation. Everybody's got the right to say no.
And for a lot of young people, if they say no, they'll threaten me, or they'll smack me, or they'll withdraw this, or they'll withdraw that. And it's that kind of thing. So it's not about necessarily a difference in age. It's about the imbalance of power and people taking control of somebody else's life.
One of the difficult things about this area is a lot of people who get involved in it who are victims don't always realise that they're victims, and it's a new area for a lot of people to actually understand that somebody they think is actually a friend or a boyfriend or whatever that might be is actually making them a victim and is actually an offender.
Most of the time, young people have no idea that they've been involved in child sexual exploitation or grooming or being recruited.
Especially if they've been living in a difficult situation, then somebody's shown lots of love and attention and, well, I'll buy this and I'll buy that and I'll buy that. It's then really easy to think, well, they love me.
So we have to tread and work with them very sensitively to ensure that they are able to trust us as practitioners, to be able to provide them with the correct support.
So it's our job to actually make sure we get those messages out there. People understand that actually, no, that behaviour isn't normal. It is actually somebody treating you in a way you shouldn't be treated, and that actually it's our job to do something about that when it crosses the line into something much more sinister than just friendship.
It is difficult to ask for help. You know, we're people that some people are very good at asking other people for that help. Some people might really struggle to take that step, and it might be personally a really difficult thing to do. And what we want is for people to know that they can if they want to.
Go and talk to somebody. You know, to an adult who you trust. Doesn't necessarily need to be in the family, but often it can be a parent. But go and talk to somebody and explain what it is about this relationship that's actually causing you some anxiety.
I would certainly encourage any young person to talk to any teacher, any member of staff, any adult, a PCSO, go into a local GP's surgery, the school nurse. There are lots and lots of agencies out there that are easily accessible to young people who will help.
Crime Stoppers is a completely independent charity. We're not part of the police, but we support the police an awful lot in what we do. What we provide is a service to the public. It's an anonymous service, so if somebody contacts Crime Stoppers either on our 0800 555 111 number or via our online form, it's completely anonymous. People don't have to give their information. We don't take names or personal information. We just encourage people to tell us. And we do have a lot of, young people. We have a Fearless website, and they can contact us, and we can provide that safe place to provide information.
If you're a friend and you want to be a good friend to your best friend, your girl who is in your particular circle of friends, a lad that's in your class. There are lots and lots of people, and you should absolutely tell. It isn't dobbing, you're not going to get them into trouble. What you're actually going to do is potentially save them from something which is harmful.
Especially with child sexual exploitation, it's a very personal sort of crime. People may not feel comfortable speaking about it to somebody that, face to face, or somebody that may come round to their house to take a witness statement. So we'll encourage people to just give us any information they've got. Let us do the work, let us pass the information on to the police, and just help us build that jigsaw that can help the police solve the crimes and help protect these children.
I remember when I was 14 years old, a girl in my class. And I'm now remembering some of the things you used to say to us in the classroom about going to parties in abandoned houses and having alcohol and going with boys in cars. And I realise that 35 years ago, I had a girl in my class who was being abused. I feel quite guilty about that. And I think, had I have known then what I know now, I would have done something about it. We've got to teach our young people not just to look after themselves, to look after each other.
Young people themselves have said, look, this isn't acceptable. Of course sexual exploitation shouldn't exist, but they also wanted to feel as though they weren't alone in that. So the idea of not in our community is about young people standing up for this, standing up for their friends, standing up for their brothers and sisters, but also that they're not alone. So that they understand that the police have got an important role to play, that the charities, that the schools and the councils, that everybody's pulling in this together.
We want children and young people in the city to have the best start in life possible. So if we can prevent one single child being subject to this kind of crime, then we've done something really positive for this city. We supported the campaign because we think social media is really important to the age group that we're talking about. So by working with Eskimo Soup on the campaign, we feel as though we've reached lots and lots of people in a media that kids will actually access.
When you look at the grooming process connected to sexual exploitation, we can see that social media is increasingly being used by perpetrators for their own devices. So when we're putting a campaign like this together, we've looked at, well, how can we use social media as a force for good? How do we use it to raise awareness of the issues, sort of what the warning signs are, how you can report and the help that you can access. Now, we've spoken with young people about how Do they use social media? Which social media do they use? And we found it's a pretty broad spectrum. So the Not In Our Community campaign uses this to the best of our advantage across multiple channels with vivid messages, thought-provoking questions. And we're now reaching thousands of young people, and the engagement is actually stronger than any campaign we've had of this nature before.
We wanted to make sure that there was something locally that people could go to. So Not In Our Community was perfect. I think when people have a local voice to actually connect with, they can connect better. They have an understanding about the area, they have an understanding about any of the issues that may be in the area, and we're supporting them to make sure that the people that are raised awareness and have picked up this campaign have somewhere else to go following on from this.
Then I heard about other ways I could get some help. I talked to a charity who said that they'd helped other girls and boys who'd been through what was happening to me. I talked to Mum. I thought she'd be so angry that I just cried. We both cried, and she said that she was mad at herself for not realising what was happening. Eventually, we went to the police. They said that I was the victim and that what Sam and the men were doing was something that they should go to prison for.
Some of the young people that we work with do feel guilty when they do come to us, saying that they have actually been in contact with the perpetrator. They've chosen to meet the perpetrator. They've chosen to speak to them online. However, one thing that we always speak to the young people about is it's not their fault.
So really it's just about working with them wherever they're at, and being that voice on the end of a phone, being that friendly face that comes around for a conversation and to figure out where next and figure out a way forward with them, really.
It's weird. After everything that happened, I still remember the good things about Sam. How he made me feel about myself, and the way even though he made me do those things, I still loved him.
We're here when they need us to be able to talk to us through the online Big Sister or walk through our door, to be able to say, look, something's happening to myself or my friend. We'll try and support them, pick that up.
If people are talking to each other and they're talking about, Not In Our Community, then it's great because, again, we're raising awareness at a very local level, and, again, we're saying this is not acceptable. No child should have to suffer this.
Do not think you only ring the police to report a crime. Please ring the police on 101 to report concerns. I would much prefer the police to get involved to prevent a crime from happening than to have to deal with the aftermath and help a victim recover and deal with a perpetrator who's committed a hideous, hideous crime.
Now that it's stopped, things aren't back to normal, but I'm trying. I'm getting a lot of help. I'm a survivor, and I hope that my story helps other young people to protect themselves and others.